The sound didn't belong in a school hallway. It wasn't a locker door slamming shut or a textbook hitting the floor. It was sharper than that, the kind of sound that makes everyone nearby freeze for a second. Lena Morris felt the heat bloom across her cheek before she even processed what had happened. Ryan Carter was standing in front of her, his palm still hovering in the air, that smug half smile tugging at his mouth like he'd just pulled off a joke. Only it wasn't a joke, not to her, not to anyone watching. A couple of students had stopped mid-step a few lockers down, their conversations fading into silence. Ryan's friends leaned against the wall behind him, grinning like they were watching a show they'd seen before and already knew the ending. Lena wasn't the kind of girl who made herself part of the noise at Roosevelt High. Most days she slipped between classes with a worn paperback tucked under her arm, earbuds in, her gaze fixed somewhere just past the floor. Teachers called her polite, students barely called her anything at all. Ryan hated that. He thrived on reactions, laughs, groans, fear. It didn't matter as long as people looked at him. And Lena, she gave him nothing. For weeks he'd been picking at her in little ways. A shoulder bump here, a comment there, always just enough to get under her skin without giving anyone a reason to step in. But today, in the space outside the science wing, with the hallway half empty and his friends as an audience, he'd decided to push further. "Hey, Mouse," he'd said when she walked by, dragging out the nickname he'd picked for her. "What, no squeak today?" She didn't answer, she just held her book tighter. That's when he leaned in, close enough for her to smell the synthetic punch of his cologne, and said, "Come on, give us a smile." The slap came right after, open palm, sharp, hard enough to turn her head. Ryan laughed, his friends following like an echo. But when Lena straightened again, the expression on her face wasn't what they expected. Her eyes, usually soft, almost shy, were locked on him now, steady and unblinking. And for the first time since this little game began, Ryan's smirk didn't look so certain. Ryan tilted his head, still trying to play it off, but there was something in Lena's stare that unsettled him. He shifted his weight, glancing at his friends like he was checking to make sure they were still watching. They were, grinning, waiting for him to finish the show. "What?" he said, his voice a little louder now. "You gonna cry?" Lena's reply was calm, almost too calm. "You shouldn't have done that." It wasn't loud, it wasn't a threat. But the way she said it, like the words were already decided long before she spoke them, made Ryan blink. He took a step closer, trying to get the balance of the moment back in his favour. "Or what?" he asked, smirking again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. Lena didn't move at first. She let the space between them stretch thin, the tension so heavy you could feel it in your chest. Ryan's fingers twitched, his hand lifting just enough to signal he was about to swing again. That's when she stepped in. Her left hand caught his wrist mid-air, not with force but with precision. The sudden stop startled him, his smirk faltering as his brain tried to catch up with what just happened. Before he could pull back, Lena shifted her stance, guiding his arm across his body in one smooth motion. The pressure on his shoulder made him flinch, a quiet hiss slipping through his teeth. She didn't twist hard, she didn't have to. "Walk away," Lena said, her voice steady, low enough that only he could hear it. For a second, no one moved. Even his friends had gone still, unsure whether to jump in or stay out of it. Ryan tested against her grip, but the more he pulled, the more uncomfortable it became. Then Lena released him, no shove, no push, just space. Ryan stumbled a step back, catching himself. His eyes flicked to his friends, searching for a laugh to cover the moment, but found only silence. Somewhere down the hall, a door creaked open. The quiet was about to break. The door at the end of the hallway swung open and Mr. Donovan, the history teacher, stepped out, holding a stack of graded papers. He stopped halfway through, turning the lock on his classroom door when he saw them. "What's going on here?" His voice carried that mix of authority and caution teachers get from years of breaking up trouble before it turns into something worse. Ryan opened his mouth, probably ready to twist the story, but before he could get a word out, the faint click of a phone camera stopping its recording cut through the silence. Two juniors who'd been leaning against the lockers earlier slipped their phones into their pockets. They didn't say anything, but their eyes said plenty. They'd seen everything. Lena didn't point them out, didn't raise her voice. She kept her eyes on Mr. Donovan and said, clear and steady, "He tried to hit me again, I stopped him. There was no defensiveness in her tone, just the truth, stated plainly. Mr. Donovan's gaze shifted between them, weighing the situation in a heartbeat. Both of you to the office, now. The walk there was quiet, except for the echo of their footsteps on the tile. Ryan trailed slightly behind her, still rubbing his arm, his earlier bravado nowhere to be found. When they reached the front office, the secretary barely looked up before calling for Mrs. Howard, the assistant principal. She led them into her office, gesturing for both to sit. "All right," she said, leaning forward. "Who's going to start?" Ryan jumped in first. She defended herself," a voice said from the doorway. One of the juniors stepped in, holding up his phone. "I have the whole thing right here." Mrs. Howard took the phone, watched for less than 10 seconds, and set it down. She didn't ask another question. Instead, she looked at Lena. "You're free to go back to class." Lena picked up her book from her lap, gave a small nod, and walked out without another word. She didn't need to. The hallway outside the office was quiet again, but Lena didn't rush. She walked with the same measured steps she always did, her book tucked under one arm. On the surface, nothing about her looked different. Inside, though, she knew something had shifted, not just for her, but for anyone who had been watching. By the time she reached her locker, she could already hear pieces of her name in passing conversations. "That's her!" She didn't even flinch. She kept her head down, swapped out her books, and made her way to the library. It was the one place in the building that never asked for more than silence. Mrs. Keller, the librarian, looked up from stamping a stack of returns. "Back again, Lena?" "Yeah," Lena said softly, moving to her usual corner table by the window. She didn't open her book right away. Instead, her mind replayed the moment in the hallway. Not the slap, not even Ryan's face, but the way her body had moved before she had time to think. It was instinct, drilled into her long before high school. Her dad's voice came back as clear as if he was sitting across from her. "You don't start the fight, but if it comes to you, you end it, and you end it quick." He'd been a military combat instructor for most of her childhood. Saturdays weren't for cartoons, they were for early runs, falling drills, and practicing holds until her muscles remembered them better than her mind did. He didn't just teach her moves, he taught her how to breathe steady when the world tilted. That was the difference today. It wasn't about being stronger than Ryan, it was about not letting him decide who she was in that moment. She could have hurt him worse. She didn't. That wasn't the point. Finally, she opened her book, letting her eyes skim over the words without taking them in. Outside the library doors, the noise of the school carried on. Lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking, voices bouncing off the walls. But here, in her small pocket of quiet, Lena could breathe. And for the first time, she wondered if someone else might breathe easier because of what she'd done. The next morning, Lena noticed it before she even made it to first period. The usual shuffle of bodies in the hallway seemed to shift around her without effort. No one blocked her path at the lockers. No one muttered anything as she passed. It wasn't fear exactly, more like a quiet recalibration, as if people were figuring out where she fit in now. Ryan wasn't at school. Rumour was he'd stayed home, still sore. Lena didn't ask, and she didn't care to know more. What caught her off guard was how many people approached her between classes. In the cafeteria, a girl she vaguely recognised sat down across from her. "You don't know me," the girl said, glancing toward the far tables. "But Ryan's been messing with my friend for months. She never told anyone. She thought no one would believe her. But now..." She stopped there, but Lena understood. Later, on her way to the library, a boy from her history class walked alongside her. "What you did," he said quietly. "Sometimes that's the only way to get people to stop." Lena didn't respond to either of them. She wasn't looking for thanks, and she didn't want to be the centre of anything. Still, she noticed the difference. The laughter in the halls didn't carry the same sharp edge it used to. People seemed a little quicker to step in when someone crossed the line. In the library, Mrs. Keller slid a book across the counter. "Thought you might like this one," she said with a small smile. "It's about someone who changes things without saying much." Lena took the book and headed to her corner table. She didn't think of herself as someone who had changed anything, but maybe, without meaning to, she'd drawn a line that others could see. And maybe that was enough. She had a feeling this quiet wouldn't last forever. By the time Monday rolled around, the buzz had faded a little, but not completely. People still talked in low voices when Lena walked by, but it was softer now, less about the fight and more about the fact that Ryan hadn't shown his face all week. That morning he finally did. Lena noticed before she even saw him. The hallway noise dipped just slightly, like the room had registered something and adjusted. Ryan came around the corner alone, his backpack slung low and his shoulders tight. The faint bruise along his forearm was still there, visible even under the harsh fluorescent lights. He didn't have his usual crew with him. A couple of friends gave him small nods from a distance, but no one walked beside him. Ryan kept his eyes forward, moving like he wanted to get to his destination without lingering. They crossed paths near the vending machines. Lena had a book in one hand, heading toward the library. For a moment, their eyes met and the noise in the hallway seemed to fade. Ryan looked away first, not with a glare, not with that smirk he used to wear like armour, just a quick glance to the floor before he kept walking. It wasn't an apology, not out loud, but it was something. In the days that followed, Lena noticed he stayed quieter in the hallways. He still sat with people at lunch, still laughed at jokes, but it was different, lighter somehow, like he was testing his place instead of trying to own the room. And when someone else made a joke at his expense, he didn't snap back, he just let it go. On Thursday during math, a folded piece of paper slid onto Lena's desk. 2 words in blocky handwriting, "My bad." She didn't look over to see if it came from him. She didn't need to. She folded it once, tucked it into her notebook, and let it stay there. Some things didn't need a scene. Some things were better left as quiet understandings. In the days after that note, life at Roosevelt High didn't transform overnight. But it shifted in small, almost invisible ways. The kind you only notice if you've been watching for a while. Lena still sat in the back row. She still took the same quiet route between classes. But the space around her felt different now. People didn't crowd her locker anymore. No one bumped her shoulder on purpose. Even the glances she got were different. No longer sizing her up, just acknowledging her. In group projects, classmates who used to treat her like a background extra now asked for her input. In the cafeteria, kids who once ignored her made room at the table without being asked. Lena didn't seek out any of it, but she didn't shy away either. The biggest change was in the library. Her corner table, once entirely hers, started to attract other students. Some sat quietly with their own books. Others worked on homework. They didn't always talk to her, but their presence was deliberate, like they'd decided this was a place where no one would mess with them. One afternoon, a freshman girl Lena didn't know approached her in that corner. "I told my brother about you," she said softly. "He goes to another school. He said I should learn self-defense too." Lena closed her book. "It's not just about the moves," she said. "It's about knowing when to stand your ground and when to walk away." The girl nodded like she understood. Maybe she didn't yet, but she would. That night at home, Lena sat at her desk. The folded note from Ryan still tucked inside her notebook. Her dad's old lessons came back to her, about strength, patience, and protecting your own peace. She realised it wasn't just about stopping Ryan that day. It was about making sure the space she lived in, even if it was just a school hallway, was one she didn't have to shrink inside of. And maybe, just maybe, she'd made it that way for a few others too. It was a Thursday afternoon, the kind where the air in the hallways felt heavy with the week's leftover noise. Lena was heading toward the library, the comfort of her book waiting for her, when a sound made her slow down, not loud but sharp enough to pull her attention. Near the stairwell, a younger boy stood pressed against the wall. He couldn't have been more than a freshman. His backpack was clutched to his chest, knuckles white around the straps. 3 older boys stood in front of him, not hitting, but leaning in close, their voices low and mocking. Lena didn't know the freshman, but she knew that look in his eyes, the tense, cornered feeling she'd carried the day Ryan decided to make her a target. She could have kept walking. She even took 2 more steps before stopping. It wasn't her fight, but some part of her wouldn't let her pass. She stepped forward, her voice calm and even. "He's with me." The tallest of the 3 turned, a smirk already forming. "You his big sister or something?" "No," Lena said, "I'm the person telling you to walk away." There was no edge to her tone, no raised voice. Just that steady certainty that made people pause. Maybe they'd heard the story. Maybe they'd seen the look in her eyes. Either way, they hesitated. The freshman used that moment to slip out from between them, moving quickly to stand beside her. The boys muttered something under their breath and headed toward the other stairwell. Lena didn't watch them go. She turned to the freshman. "You okay?" He nodded, still holding his backpack tight. "Yeah, thanks." "Anytime," she said, and she meant it. When she finally made it to the library, Lena opened her book but didn't read right away. Her dad's voice echoed in her head, about strength not just being for yourself, but for stepping in when someone else can't. She hadn't planned to get involved, but maybe that was the point. Walking to her table, she realised the look in that freshman's eyes had been the same one she'd carried the day Ryan cornered her, and she wasn't about to let anyone else feel that alone. By the end of the week, Lena could feel the shift more clearly. It wasn't that the teasing and pushing had vanished. Schools didn't work like that. But the edge had dulled. The quick, cutting laughs in the hallway were fewer. People seemed to think twice before crossing someone's line. She saw it in small moments. A boy in the cafeteria reached toward another kid's lunch tray, then pulled his hand back without saying a word. Two girls whispering in the hallway stopped mid-sentence when their classmate walked past. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. For Lena, the changes were quieter. She still sat in the back of class, she still moved through the hallways without rushing. But now, when she met someone's eyes, they didn't dart away as fast. Sometimes they even stayed, offering a quick nod, like they understood something unspoken. One afternoon, as she was packing her things, the freshman from the stairwell stopped at her desk. "I signed up for a self-defense class," he said, almost shy. "My mum found one at the community centre, starts next month." Lena smiled, closing her notebook. "Good, you'll be glad you did." He hesitated, then added, "People are different because of you." She didn't answer right away. Words like that felt too heavy to just nod at. But as she walked home later, the thought stayed with her. The idea that small moments could stack up and shift the shape of a place without anyone realising until much later. At home, her dad was in the garage working on something with his hands. He looked up when she stepped in. "How was school?" Lena leaned against the doorframe, thinking back over the week. "Different," she said. Her dad raised an eyebrow. "Good different or bad different?" A small smile tugged at her mouth. "Good." A few afternoons later, Lena found herself walking the quiet hallway long after most students had gone home. The hum of the lights overhead was steady, and the polished tiles reflected the soft fading daylight. When she reached the science wing, she slowed. The spot where it had all started looked so ordinary now. Just another stretch of floor, another row of lockers. But in her mind, she could still feel the sting on her cheek, hear the sharp echo of that slap, and see the moment Ryan realised things were not going the way he'd expected. Back then, it had felt like the hallway was closing in on her. Now it felt open. It wasn't about Ryan anymore. He kept his distance, and she kept hers. Whatever had passed between them had settled into an unspoken understanding. What mattered more was how the space itself had changed. Students moved through it differently now, and maybe they carried themselves a little taller because of it. She thought about the freshmen she'd helped near the stairwell, the girl in the cafeteria who had spoken up, and the students who had started filling the library's corner tables. She even thought of Mrs. Keller sliding books across the counter with that knowing smile, like she could see things shifting too. Her dad's voice came back to her once more. Strength isn't about how hard you hit, it's about what you're willing to protect and what you're willing to walk away from. Lena adjusted her backpack and stepped outside. The late afternoon sun spread gold across the parking lot, warm against her face. She opened her book as she walked, the sounds of the day fading into something calm. The world wouldn't always be kind, she knew that well enough. But she also knew something else. Even the quietest person could draw a line and mean it. And sometimes, that was enough to change more than just one moment. True strength isn't about being loud or overpowering others. It's about staying calm, protecting yourself, and being willing to stand up when you see something wrong, for yourself and for others. Thank you for watching this story, all the way to the very end. I'm truly grateful for that. Before we wrap up, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. I'll see you again soon here on Rain Inside.